Alright, so today I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, something that's been hot on the subreddit and something that I feel very strongly about for a while now, pretty much since Legion. And that's tower knowledge and also time gates and how time gates are used in MMOs. So I think if we just, first I just want to talk a little bit about tower knowledge and, my thoughts on that. I'll be farming Korthia rares while we do this, so hopefully it's not too boring. So here's my thoughts about tower knowledge. I think that it's actually a really good concept and something that should have been introduced with the base of the game. I'm actually a little bit shocked that it hasn't, that they didn't introduce something like that, because I think that's something that's just very core to those kind of like roguelike simulators. However, I think my biggest problem right now with it is that none of the changes feel that strong. So when you compare the Torghast talent tree, most of them are like fairly passive buffs that I don't think, drastically change your game, nor do they make it easier in the sense of like, okay, this was really hard to do now, but now it's easy because I got a chance to do something. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of what I wish I would have gotten from a tower knowledge system. So, if you compare it to another roguelike, so for example, I think Rogue Legacy has a pretty good one, and then another game like Hades, right? They both have like pretty good out-of-game options. I think Rogue Legacy is a little more impactful, but Hades does a pretty good job at it too. And you can kind of see in those talent trees, you get, I think, way more benefit out of it, and it makes it so that the game itself becomes a lot easier to the point where I don't actually think most people would be able to complete it without the tower knowledge, right? And then in this version, because it's designed to be completed, I feel like tower knowledge is really just there to... It's kind of just like minor quality of life changes and just a little bit of a boost to your overall speed. It doesn't really feel like a drastic change. Let me turn the sound down just a little bit. I think it's a little bit too loud while I'm talking. Anyways, so that's kind of like the big issue right now. It's just not impactful enough, right? You get like minor things like a 10% haste bonus while empowered. That's cool, but it's not really anything great. I think the best ones are the ones that are like the Adamant Bolts unlock. That one's really cool. Unfortunately, it's we can't get it yet. And then the other one that I really like was like the Efficient Looter. Those are really good ones, and I think they do kind of change how you play the game. I wish we would have seen a little bit more of those, but we're not really getting that many. I think we're typically getting like passive buffs, and even the ones at the bottom row I don't think are that powerful compared to what I would have liked to see. So yeah, then the other big issue, and this is kind of more of the bulk of the discussion today, is about time gates, right? And I think that people are mad, and rightfully so, that tower knowledge is time gated, right? And so what do we mean when we talk about time gate, right? So time gate is generally something that you can't dump infinite hours into. You're essentially locked by a certain amount. Sometimes that could be the case of like a daily thing. Usually, I think for MMOs, we're typically talking about weekly releases, right? So I think a good example of a time gate was the Covenant campaigns, right? A new chapter comes out every single week. You could also, to make like a real-life analogy, it's like a TV show coming out with a new episode every week, right? Even though, to be fair, some shows, like I think Black Mirror, they release their whole season in a big bulk, so if you want to, you can, watch the whole thing. So, the problem with the time gate and the fact that it's not that powerful is, to me, it feels like tower knowledge right now just serves as a way to make Torghast easier over time. Not really something that you're working towards unlocking or something that you feel excited about unlocking. It's kind of just, oh hey, it's a little bit easier this week, it's a little bit easier this week, it's a little bit easier this week. It never really, I think, dares change the way you play the game, and it never really makes you want to go for it. So yeah, that's pretty much why I think people are upset about it, and I think people should be upset. If we talk about like why time gates exist, I think the most obvious thing is everyone will say like, well, we need people to stay subbed every single week, and I mean that's the truth of it, right? You want people to come back every single week if you're in a sub model, right? However, I think with some time gates they're okay, and some time gates are not okay. So let's talk about some time gates that I think are okay, right? I think the first one is player power. When you're dealing with things that are massive player power benefits, I think it's okay to have some level of time gate so that it doesn't feel like, one, you're forced into doing, an unreasonable amount of work just to stay relevant. But also, I think that it's so that, people aren't just done. They're not at their strongest on day one. I think that's, pretty reasonable. What is this? Corthian Relic? Cool. However, I think when we're dealing with that kind of player power, I would really prefer it to stay on the side of group content. Because with group content, that's fair, right? We can schedule a couple, hours a week to do stuff. But when you start getting into solo content, I think it gets a little annoying to force everything to be time-gated. Because the amount of time that you put into an MMO, I believe, should reflect on, how strong you are. And, that's a good thing. If you play more, you should be stronger. Obviously, I don't think you should be able to finish the whole entire expansion in, the first week. But, why not let people who want to play more get a little bit ahead? Especially if it's something that isn't even that tied to player power, right? So, kind of going through a couple of examples that I think do this well, and a couple of examples that don't do this well. The good example that I think is fine is Renown. I think it's okay for Renown to be on a time gate, because even though player power is associated to it in some way, you get your potency conduits, you get your later tier stuff. I think those are kind of fine. I don't think it would be that fun to have to grind Renown super, super fast. And the good thing is you always do get the chance to catch up. So I think Renown is fine. I don't think that's a big deal. I would have liked to see it be, I think, a little more loose. I think it was only 3 a week, and I didn't really like that too much. But, Renown's fine. It's a pretty okay one. And then other ones that I think are fine is obviously raid bosses, right? People always bring this up. Oh, if you don't like time gates, oh, what about raids? It's okay, listen, raids, first off, they're the quintessential, in my opinion, they're the quintessential content in WoW. They're what you are playing this game for. For most people, I think raids are kind of the pinnacle, right? And on top of that, it's also group content, and it's very heavily associated with both your player power in the form of gear, and it's heavily in the form of just your overall player progression. Because I do think that how much you raid and progress through raid is a very good reflection of, kind of how much you've completed on your character, right? So it wouldn't really, I don't think it would really be good for the game to be able to let you run infinite raids nonstop. People would just basically farm the boss that they've already done over and over and over again. I don't think that's a good thing, it would feel really, really bad, and it wouldn't really work towards that feeling of progression of okay, let's try a new boss, and next week we can farm some of the old bosses. So yeah, raids, they're fine. And then another good one is actually similar to raids, old raids. I think there's so many of them at this point that it's okay to sort of roll the dice and try to get lucky, go get your mount or something. I think that's kind of okay, especially because you can do it on a bunch of different alts, so you get a lot of rolls of that form. I don't know. I'm not really 100% sure if it would be a bad thing necessarily for old weekly raids to not be on, essentially a weekly thing. But because it is old content, it's kind of whatever. Go once a week, go get your chance at a mount, have fun with it. No biggie. Now, let's look at some of the bad ones that I think are trash, okay? So, the first one is reputations, okay? I don't know why reputations are behind a gate. That does not make sense to me. Am I gonna die here? Oh my goodness. I'm actually gonna die because I can't AoE these. Tragic. Okay. Well, probably shouldn't have done that. Anyway, So reputations, I think reputations being time gated are pretty bad. And it's okay, I think, for like maybe a couple of them to be time gated in the sense that, you know, maybe some of them offer you a certain amount a day, but right now I think almost every single rep in the game is essentially like a world quest counter where you just come in, you get a little bit every day, and then you keep coming back over and over and over again. I don't really like that. I think very few reputations right now just will give you something to grind for. And that's actually something I really liked about TBC, and I think a lot of people like that about TBC, is the fact that you can get rep by doing dungeons or questing. There's just a lot more options, and even if you don't need the Exalted, I think it's just something fun to go for. I've definitely done some dungeons where I don't even need the gear, but like, hey, maybe I'll just get my Exalted Cenarian Expedition or something, and, you know, that's good enough for me. So, I think another really good one, a good example of a bad time gate is the old Artifact Power and Artifact Knowledge. And we'll talk about Artifact Knowledge a little bit later. But with Artifact Power, I think it was really lame because it just kind of felt like you were always going for more, but then it would like kind of artificially cap it, so that you couldn't actually get as much as you wanted. It was very, very it was very slow, and then it became a problem where every single week Artifact Knowledge would kick in, but without the Artifact Knowledge, for those that don't know, Artifact Knowledge basically reduced how much you needed to get the next level of Artifact Power. Same actually can be applied for Azerite Power and Azerite Knowledge as well. It's the same thing. But yeah, basically, I think those systems were really bad for the game because there was no end goal. It was just an arbitrary show up every week, play the game, and you're never really behind, but you're never really done. You're just sort of always in this, like, perpetual middle. I don't think that's good. I don't think that's fun. I think people like to have some kind of end goal to work towards, and they like to feel that when they get something done, it's actually, like, accomplishing something. So, I know a lot of people liked the knowledge system because it reduced how much you needed every single week. But I actually think that was bad because it made it kind of feel bad to ever go and grind something. Because you would always be, you know, kind of like capped on how much you could do, and it was never worth it because next week you would get so much more value out of, you know, not just doing different things, but just doing like just the same garbage you've been doing. And I know some people probably bring up, okay, wait, Artifact Power was technically not time-gated. You could farm as much as you wanted. And that's sort of true, but I think that because of Artifact Knowledge, it essentially did become a time gate. You did essentially hit these, like, mathematically impossible points where you couldn't really, you know, do much more than, like, you're, like, farming Moss Souls for nothing. You're not going anywhere with your level. You're just sort of stuck waiting for the next Artifact Knowledge to come in. So, yeah, those are pretty much like the big examples. I know something people have brought up a lot as a counterpoint was that there's this the time gates make it so that there's no sense of like an endless grind, and I actually disagree with that because I think that without a time gate, you know when you're done. You know, you have a specific goal to work towards, and you can put that time in whenever you want, right? So the difference between having a time gate and not having a time gate is actually irrelevant, in my opinion, because you're still getting the same amount of work done. It's just now you don't have the freedom of when you want to do it. You're always being told, okay, you can only do this much this week. You can only do this much next week. And so you're actually reducing your options. I don't know if that actually does anything to help. I completely disagree and reject the notion that that somehow makes it feel like endless, because what I feel when I'm time gated is that instead of a grind, you know, like a set goal to work towards, I'm basically told, here's this endless chore that you have to come back and do every single week, right? It doesn't actually feel like a grind, because I think grinds are okay for MMOs. You just have to have it has to be somewhat reasonable, and it needs to have a end goal that you're working towards, and once you're done, you know, you're done. So you know, that sense of completeness, I think, is just something that's missing from WoW right now. When they bring these new things, you know, Paragon reps are another big culprit where there's just no sense of completeness. You're just constantly farming nonstop for the chance of something. You know, it's like it feels really bad that we can't just be done with the game at a certain point and go move on to other things, because there are other things to do both inside and outside the game. Um, and I just wish they would kind of embrace that a little more and, you know, let you be done with your character. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts about tower knowledge, and definitely about time gating, why I don't think it's very healthy for the game, and why I hope at the very least people can understand why people are frustrated with time gates. I know why Blizzard does it. Again, it's because it's very good for a WoW, sorry, for an MMO. It brings back people. It kind of forces player retention when you have to come back every single week and you can't just play through 10 hours in one day. But I think it's kind of disrespectful both to people's time and people's money when you're charging them a sub fee for it. So, you know, hopefully they kind of take a look at that and go back more to you know, a grind